right. David Christensen, CISO of PlanSource here in Boston in a Lamborghini. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man. This is awesome.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you here. And believe it or not, it's almost been like, what, 2 years since we met for the first time?
Yeah, it's been about 2 years.
Insane. And now we're finally meeting in person, although we've talked tons of times on the phone. And I am really proud to say that one of the first believers in dope security, man.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I love what you guys have done to that industry. You are disrupting it, and I love the product, and my team loves it, and we make a lot of use out of it.
But today is all about the CISOs in cars, and obviously you're one of the CISOs I respect because you're always trying to push the boundaries. And in fact, I think it was actually Anjali who said this really best. She's like, you know what? The thing about David is that he wants to kind of look at it from a different perspective. Yes. Always. Tell me more about that. What makes you want to be different?
I think I'm just different to begin with, right? I mean, I've always had sort of inquisitive nature. I like solving problems. Yeah. And I like to solve problems that, for the long haul, right? And I've been at technology, in the technology industry for years. Right. And to me, security has always suffered from sort of that short-sightedness, right? I want to solve a problem, but I want to solve it for today, not looking at what kind of problems you're going to have in the future. And so, for me, it's a challenge to try to take my experience and my sort of focus and I guess in some ways disrupt how practitioners and security teams look at those things. And I know it's pretty cliche to say that, everybody in security right now is trying to align with the business. Yeah. But I've always looked at it that way. Even technology.
Because you want them to I think, in a lot of ways you've kind of trying to be very, very pragmatic, very practical, yes. But also, hey, let's look at the cutting edge of things before we just write it off.
Right. Well, I mean, just to be honest, a lot of the technologies that I've looked at that are on the cutting edge, one of the reasons why I've gravitated towards them is because they typically are actually solving the problem.
But you must have a very good filter, because I've also seen horror stories of people working work with a startup, it gets ripped out or they get acquired. How do you because I think people want to be like you and then they get a little scared, they get a bit shy. Yeah. So what would you recommend to someone who's like, I want to be a CISO that works with startups? What would you do?
Well, I mean, for me, one of the things that I do, and I think you're kind of asking the question about how have I been able to not be in a situation where I've made a decision that ended up backfiring. Right. I mean, I think one of the I kind of alluded to it a few seconds ago. I get nitty gritty into the actual problem statements, right? Yeah. The use cases where I need something, and when I'm really interviewing a vendor, mm-hmm. Which is really what I'm doing when I'm looking at their product, I first clue to me that they actually get it is they understand the problem and they start taking the solution way beyond what I even thought it was.
Okay,
right?
got it.
So I can tell they're vested in it.
Is it a detailed understanding?
Yeah, they're very detailed, right?
So this is more of I guess, part one is, does this person really have a very, very clear understanding of the problem statement?
Or are they just throwing marketing terms at me?
Got it, right? And I think, but you see those as well, I'm
sure.
Oh,
absolutely. I see those a lot. I see, they'll give me the marketing spiel of why their product is different. And I go, well, it's not resonating with me because you're not even looking at my problem. You're just stating the industry focused problem, but not my problem.
But what about part two? Okay, so part one, they have a very, very detailed knowledge of the problem. Part two?
Yeah, well,
because you might know this stuff,
right?
I guess it solves the problem.
Well, I typically will want to talk to more than one person, right? Like in your case, right? I've spoken to some people on your teams. We've had conversations. My team has had conversations. Right. Even before we decided to go with dope, I wanted my team to have, confidence and understanding. And I had the vision, and I have the tolerance of looking at vendors that nobody's heard of before. Yeah. And they trusted me on that. But I use their feedback on whether or not, I'm just being blinded by this new shiny thing that I think is going to fix things for me, or do they see not only the solution, but they see the sincerity coming from the vendor. Because I think that's the other thing. Sometimes you can fake sincerity.
Yeah, right? That's true.
And I've been at this stuff long enough to know what that looks like. Where when someone's faking it. Mm-hmm. And the process between first conversation and I want to buy this from you, it's not short.
Yeah, right? There's always a process, and I think, everyone is different, but the mannerisms and something needs to click. Right. And it needs to also click over time. Right.
Yeah, I'll give you an example, and I won't use the vendor's name, but we looked at some vendor last year, completely different space.
Yeah.
And they were trying to solve a problem, and initially it sounded really good.
Which area?
It was in data discovery.
Okay, data discovery.
And so, being in an industry where I'm concerned with PHI, PII, and there's a distinct difference and a small nuance between what is PII and what PHI is.
Yeah.
Our concern was, we can go buy something that's going to look for PII, but we really need to deal with PHI because we're HIPAA compliant. And we're looking at going at high trust, and those are the concerns. So I started looking at this vendor that was really new. I was introduced, not similar to how I was introduced to you, but in a similar scope. And I started talking to him, and it sounded really good.
Yeah.
But as the sort of partnership in the sort of trial period or investigation period went on, it started getting very salesy. And then I started getting pressure, are you going to buy? And I'm like, we haven't even gotten into the technical.
POC?
The POC had just started, but they were looking at trying to satisfy what I would consider rudimentary problems, things that anybody in that space should solve.
Yeah.
And we started getting into the nitty gritty of, okay, you've discovered data. Show me that you can see the difference between PHI
and
PII, right? And then also one of the claim to fames was the ability to sort of give me an understanding of who's using the data, how it's being used, and who could get access to the data.
Oh, okay, got it.
And in a short period of time, I started realizing that they their concepts were great, but their execution just wasn't there yet. And maybe it'll get there.
Yeah.
It just wasn't there for me. And then when I got the feedback from my team, they were seeing the same thing. It's like, okay, we dodged a bullet and we pivoted and looked at something different.
Got it.
But that's what I mean. Like, you can, doing this enough times and being in the industry long enough, I can kind of detect.
You can kind of detect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I kind of know what you're doing.
I kind of jokingly say it's like dating, right?
Yeah.
Like if you've had some bad relationships,
you kind of see the red flags.
Kind of see the red flags, right?
Unless you are the red flag. In my case, my ex-girlfriend's attest.
Right. No, right. Or you've been through a divorce.
But ex-girlfriends, not well, haven't gone through the divorce yet, but the ex-girlfriend thing definitely.
Right. And you take stock, you self-reflect, and you're like, is it me or was it them, or is it a combination? But
always, yeah.
But and don't get me wrong, there's been times where I've worked with vendors, and my desire for a solution is so strong that I'm pushing them into an area.
You're kind of like you're kind of patching. Let's just say you're missing. Oh, that's actually fair. Like, it's kind of like when you love them so much, you're just like missing their flaws. Basically.
Right. Exactly. It's kind of like the reason why you bring in a third-party assessor, because you're biased and you're going to ignore things and say, yeah, we know we're going to fix that. Well, it's been 3 years, you still haven't fixed it. Right?
Those are two great things. I mean, for sure, like seeing how detailed the person that you talk to, probably like the founder or at least the product management team, depending on who you talk to, even if it is a salesperson, they should understand it very well. But then probably second, like you said, making sure you have third-party assessors that are kind of framing in the decision. Anything else that you would recommend?
I mean, I think you should definitely speak to the engineering level teams.
Okay.
Right? Like, even if it's not in depth, not crazy, even if it's just a conversation, do they sound passionate? Are they invested? Do they sound like they're just there for a job?
I noticed that you didn't ask anything about, like, what about the financial health of the company? Because isn't that the scary part?
I think everybody focuses on that scary part, but think of it this way, right? I mean, you could pick a big company who tomorrow decides to fold or decides to pull out of that whole feature set. I mean, look what's happened with VMware. Right?
Yeah, I mean, like VMware with their purchase. I mean, it is
now they're just pulling stuff out and saying we're not doing that anymore, or they're raising the prices so high that you don't even want to go. Continue.
Exactly. And by the way, I'm a big fan of Hawk 10 and the Broadcom strategy. It just it does sucks for customers, right?
Well, right. I mean, but my point of that wasn't to say
a
bad decision on their part. It's the risk is always there, no matter the size of the company, the financial stability of the company. So my philosophy has been, I'm going to take a risk no matter what. So take a risk on something that is closer to solving my problem than just going out and buying what everybody tells me is a good idea.
Fair,
right? Because I mean, I've had big companies, big vendors in the same space you're in who've sold me things that told me that it was going to be a certain way and it was going to work, and it works day one, but then as the time goes on, it's like, all right, well, this is failing in a way that's going to make my customers not want to use this anymore.
There's no lemon law in cybersecurity.
Right, yeah, exactly. There's no lemon law.
Although I am offering that. Whenever somebody buys dope, I do offer a lemon law, like, because sometimes they say, well, what if it doesn't work? And you know the problem, right? I mean, you have to throw down money, and sometimes people basically, it's not coming from our personal pocket, but it is the company's money, which we're judicious with.
Absolutely.
And if it doesn't work in the first 3 months or so of, and I just tell them, well, if you don't like it, I'll give you your money back.
Right.
Like, I'm very simple because I'm fine with that. I have no problem. If somebody doesn't like our solution, they can get the money back.
Right. Well, what you touched on about the financial aspect of it too, it's kind of pivoting off of that a little bit. I also see a situation where the bigger a company gets, and I'm not saying that, eventually everybody gets there, right? But one of the reasons why I've really liked smaller startup companies that are solving these problems is there's intimacy, right?
That's true.
So you have the ability to really help influence, but also understand and have the close contact with those who are solving those problems for you within the organization. You're not 10 levels separated.
Deeper, separated.
Right? Where I have to schedule a meeting
just to get the PM on the phone.
Just to get the PM on the phone to bless my ability to go talk to an engineering team.
But I think that's also culture. In my view, like,
True.
If you were like, Kunal, I want to talk to an engineer, I'd be like, well, how can I help you today? Like,
Right.
let me like, and if you're like, well, I just wanted to understand how this is done. It's like more of a personal research project. I'm like, sounds good. I'll connect you with like either myself, because I would probably know, or Aiden, which is our head of product, or maybe Tim or Sunil, who's, both in engineering.
But you kind of touched on something though, right? Like, it is culture. But in the experiences that I've had, most of the time what happens when I ask that question and they try to answer it, that's when I start feeling like I'm being salesy.
But
they're being salesy.
And unfortunately, like, that's one of the let's call it the side effects of these cybersecurity companies, because they've become into, like, you're trying to bridge what was there 20 years ago, where it was like a specialized industry where you're trying to convince people that this is an important area. And now we have people at these companies like yourself who are CISOs, who have gotten that knowledge. You now have to say, look, I'm okay on the technical side. What I need to know is this person going to help support me?
Right. Absolutely. Right. And I think one of the reasons why I really liked your platform was not just the problem you were solving from the Fly-Direct, but the ease of use.
Right.
I think a lot of times organizations overlook the ease of use to get to that value proposition faster. If it's going to take me a year for my team to figure out how to use this thing, it's not going to work.
It's over already.
It's over. It's over, right? Because you'll lose momentum. You're probably going to make a lot of mistakes on the way there, and you're going to tarnish the reputation of not only the team but the product. And I've been in that situation before where it's like, this product sounds really good. I can understand it. My team may not, or maybe they do, but it's hard to deploy. So I don't want to say it's the team's fault. But at the end of the day, when they're trying to do all this work and they're impacting the business, you've got it. Now you start getting, pitchforks and flaming torches, and they're telling you, I don't want to use this anymore. And you never even got it off the ground.
And I think, like, that mentality, if we think about them, is like, culturally, I believe in, if you're a customer, you can talk to basically anyone in the company, right? Yeah. Okay, is it like one of my, become a really good friend, Ken, right? Product engineer. He's basically not just a QA engineer, but he actually works very directly with customers, as an example. Another great example is Nigel, right? He's like, he was one of the first engineers in the company, but he's built the proxy, a lot of the proxy code and the HTTP2 stuff. But if you're like, yo, I just wanted to understand something like this, I'm like, yeah, sure, happy to answer questions. You can just chat with them, because it's all about helping you maybe solve something or maybe understand something. Yeah. And I think that's a mentality shift. Now, like, obviously the converse of that, somebody may say is like, hey, we don't want to distract these people, but that doesn't happen every day. Right. It's not like every single day somebody is like, oh, I need a little bit of help.
Right. Exactly. It's usually edge cases. There's usually, something's popped up, or, or it's the budgeting cycle and you're trying to figure out, are you going to be doing this, or is that going to happen, and that kind of stuff. So
and I also believe that, like, and I've had to learn this, right? The people have to model the way, and I had good mentors in that manner. I say mentors, but really they were managers, right? Yeah. Like, I always blame Jason, because Jason Merrick, he was, one, amazing leader, but two, he's like, point of PM is to be between customers and engineering. And key part, you need to be in front of customers. Right. You sitting inside your office and just chilling doesn't make a difference. No. And I am kind of now saying the evolution of that is that as PM, we have to know the customers really, really well and talk to them every single day. Yep. Otherwise, you're not a product manager. No. Right. How will you know?
Right. Yeah, but it's a two-way street, though. I feel like sometimes I've had to, in my past, tell my teams that you can come to me and tell me you're having a problem with something, but are you letting the vendor know? the partner.
Yeah. That's something.
And not even just problems, but like if you're asking for enhancements, you wish this one could do this. Are you communicating that to that partner, or are you waiting for them to extract that from
you? Yes, and then I think that also is being proactive about it. I think one of the cool things, obviously, technologies like Slack do for us, it allows us to communicate very effectively without although I prefer emails when it comes to like really making sure things are written down.
Well, right, yeah, especially long
form stuff. Yeah. But sometimes when it comes to a very quick aside or a question, it's just easy to text someone on Slack, right?
Yeah, no, you need a quick question, or just at least framing the context of the email that I'm probably going to send you.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a couple questions for you, but I'll follow up with an email. I mean, I'm a big
it's
like for that.
Again, a very Jason Merrick thing. I keep piping this guy up. He's like the head of product at Tenable, but he was just my longest standing manager of all time. But he always used to say, just do some hallway walking, go in, like you want to talk to people, have the conversation. So when you send them the email, it's not like this massive surprise.
Well, it's funny you say that too, because that's actually something that I even with this newer generation of people coming into the industry, it feels like it's still something that you have to teach, right? Like you can open a ticket, okay, but did you talk to that person before you open the ticket to at least give them an understanding of what you're going to do and an opportunity to make sure that you're going to provide valid, concise information
or comment on it, for example.
Right. So it's like, I'm going to follow this up with a ticket, but I wanted to know this, right? And maybe based on that conversation, your ticket's going to be different now. Right? And you're not going to have the banter back and forth of, well, why did you put this in the ticket? Why didn't we talk first? All that kind of stuff. So I do see that, and I feel like that also is what carries over to what I was talking about with having the partnership with a vendor, right? Like if you're not communicating both the good, the bad, and the ugly at all times, then how can you call it a partnership? And I look at the same thing with a vendor.
That's true, very true.
Right?
I mean, it's like we always, of course, the sales speak is always, we're partnering together. I don't have customer vendor, but you and I are very similar. It's like, yes, it's customer vendor, fair enough. But yes, we do want to work together to solve a problem.
Be a partner, 100%.
Yes, exactly.
And I've let go of value-added resellers because they weren't really a partner. Like I don't hear from them until they
want to buy something.
It's renewal time, or there's a new product they're trying to sell to everybody.
Do you like using VARs or?
I mean, there's pros and cons.
Which one would you use? I mean, you don't have to shout them out.
No. Guidepoint's one of the
biggest. Great, yeah.
One of the big ones that I've used. Honestly, that's probably one of the few that I still feel is still focused on being a partner.
Who do you use through Guidepoint? Is there like a person that you usually talk to?
Bill Malone.
Bill Malone.
Well, he's based
Bill,
out
here. Say what's up to me, please.
Yeah, here out of Boston. So I mean, my philosophy is, and maybe not just a philosophy, it's more of a reality.
Is that because he talks to you and works with you to see what you're trying to look for?
Yeah, so where I was going to go with it is, like in the case of, like, say, dope.security, right?
Yeah.
I didn't need the VAR to help me find a product. Because unfortunately what usually happens is they're going to have a portfolio of companies that they're selling. Right, they are a little risk adverse at looking at new startups unless there's traction.
And by the way, it's difficult. I mean, but now we are working very closely with Guidepoint in all regions. And George, at the time, when you and I first spoke, like I didn't know them, and it's difficult, as you said. Even though I would have wanted to work with him, at Guidepoint, like I just wouldn't have had the connection built.
Right. No, absolutely, and that's kind of what I mean. Like when I start looking at new, innovative, disruptive technologies, I'm expecting them not to have a partnership with a VAR, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening, if the product is as good as I believe it is, and in most cases I've been right, eventually what ends up happening is the VAR picks them up, and now I'm buying through the VAR direct.
Well, it's great to hear that, and honestly, for most people, I think that the VAR vendor relationship, like it is, if you're going to go in and start selling through VARs, that you're here for the long haul.
Right.
And even that's what we do, right?
Right.
That's why we're 100% reseller and channel focused at Dope.
Yeah, no, and I don't know if I fully answered the question, but I feel like VARs provide a value around not the selling part. They can help me navigate. If I'm looking at, say, a commodity technology, they can help me navigate with
trying to buy Sentinel-1 tomorrow.
Tell me which vendor has caused the most problem for your customers, so I can avoid that one. Right.
It's kind of like a wisdom of the crowd thing, right?
Right. Absolutely. It's crowdsourcing, understanding. It's sort of like the threat intelligence, right?
So tell me about like Gartner. Do you ever use a Gartner analyst? Do you talk to a Gartner analyst?
So when I worked for a public company, I was told I had to.
Oh, so you had like a subscription?
Yeah. So I worked for a public company, and we were pretty much told that we needed to use Gartner anytime we were looking at new technologies, but I would say 99% of the time, I was already ahead of where they were looking at something, and they would agree with me most cases that the bigger vendors that I was looking at, they're solid, right? They're stable at that moment in time, but the use cases that I was presenting to them, they're like, yeah, they're not going to do that. So my philosophy was kind of like, well, you're making me use you're making me use Gartner, but I'm already ahead of them. I'm already ahead of where
you're already looking at new and
right.
New. Yeah.
And I don't need them to tell me that I'm making the right decision, because I feel like I already am, right? I mean, not saying that there's some organizations that don't benefit from it, but I just, and I don't want to sound negative, but
I like Gartner too, but
there's some good
sometimes. There's real, like, for example, if I want to learn, what I always tell people is think of it like a reference guide.
Yeah. Right.
Don't look at it as thou shalt do this. Right. It's not command.
Yeah, like their magic quadrant stuff is good. I do like using it to look at it, like, where are the players today? Like, where's the vendor that I'm looking at? Where are they
standing? Yeah.
But what I don't like is getting on an analyst call, because I have to do this to vet 3 vendors, and I'm just like, why?
Why?
Like, I can have a conversation with those vendors, and my gut will tell me whether or not this is the right
vendor for you. Yeah, right? Got it.
I don't need Gartner to tell me that. And I can do research, or my team can do research to try to figure out, how many problems has this company had. But that's also changing too. Like we use Black Kite to do third-party risk assessments.
Right.
And one of the things we do it for is some of our other partners, right? I'm using your technology. I want to know if you have an incident, or you don't do so well in your SOC audit or your ISO assessment. I want to know, that information in near real time, and it helps me, frame risk. And that's really what it's about. To me, Gartner's about trying to establish not security risk, but the risk of using a technology, and is it going to satisfy your needs? So I value that to a certain degree, but I don't want to waste my time sitting on a phone call listening to an analyst tell me something about a vendor they barely know about.
Yeah, I mean, because when giving it from the other side of the coin, right? When you're a product management or product marketing, you're basically having the conversation and attempting to influence them and show them that here's where we're going and here's where we're headed, which is great because you get the visibility. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, that visibility is greater than or equal to 20 million in ARR, which cuts out people that are trying to make a change like us.
Right.
Or I think it's 40 actually. So the idea that I'm curious about is like how you do read the MQs and those are helpful for you, but you don't actually talk to a Gartner analyst yourself.
Not anymore. I mean, when I worked for that publicly traded company, I did, because it was more of a mandate that I had to anyways.
But they paid, it's an expensive
subscription. Right, no, right. And honestly, at a publicly traded company, they were using Gartner for more than just the security tools, the IT infrastructure, things like that. So it was probably a benefit for them holistically to use them for the business. But being told, I need to solve unique problems, and I need to talk to an analyst who doesn't understand my unique problem.
That's
whether or not the vendor that I'm looking at is going to solve the problem. I've already had that conversation, right? I've already done what I was talking about earlier, where I see their sincerity. They're not giving me smoke and mirrors, right?
There's no like the bullshit meter is not going off.
Right.
The cards,
yeah. I don't feel like they're just trying to bamboozle me and bullshit me to the point where I just believe everything they say, right? And, so at that point, talking to an analyst, whether it's Gartner or anybody else in an industry, I'm not going to say that it's not useful, but for what we're trying to do, and I think security has to be on the cutting edge of solving problems, because these problems are hyper developed. Like, they show up in a moment's notice. All of a sudden, MFA's got so many problems. It was supposed to be the saving grace. And it's been misused, and people don't understand it. And
well, MFA is a tough one, right? I think it gets a bad rap, because honestly, I think people basically tell everyone, it's like, oh, SMS is the worst. And I'm like, okay, I mean, let's start there. Most people are not really going to want to register like a Google Authenticator on their phone. It's too complicated for them.
I know.
So just have an SMS OTP, it's fine.
Right.
Like, my mom will survive.
Right.
And if an SS7 attack is done to my mom, I'll be very surprised.
Yeah. I mean, but I will say, though, there are still the social engineering aspect. So where I see the SMS-based MFA still, and it's not a user issue. It's like the case of SIM swapping.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah. That's what SS7 meaning SIM, yeah.
Well, right, but I mean, this is going into a store and saying, I am this person.
Oh, yeah, which is not their fault, really.
Right, it's not the user's fault. It's the organization not having policies or controls in place that are checks and balances to make sure that just because somebody walked off the street, you're not validating this is actually who they say they are.
Correct.
So social engineering is still going to be a problem, and that can happen even with. I mean, look at the push notification for for MFA.
Yeah.
People get exhausted and just say, "Screw it, I'm done," and then they approve it, which is what the attacker was hoping for. Now they're in.
Now they're in. Yeah, right. Exactly. And so when you look at that, and then now there's the new mechanisms of having a more sophisticated phishing page that stores your auth credential, meaning the token.
Right.
And then it does basically an emulating of the actual login page. So if I'm using Okta, for example, that's why the phishing resistant two-factor authentications even exist.
Yes.
I think it's tough.
It is. It is. I mean, it's tough. I think part of the problem is, like a lot of these technologies, it gets adopted because it's supposed to be the saving grace, and there's not a great guideline on what are the proper ways to use it for the use case that you're in.
So what do you think about FIDO U2F tokens then?
I mean, I think they're great. I mean, I've been a huge YubiKey user since the beginning of YubiKey back in the early days, and I was trying to use it for like Linux servers to do authentication, doing the thumbprint and all that stuff. I think the challenge still exists with
a hardware token delivery.
Right. How do you?
I said the same thing.
I get you a token, great, but then if you lose it, and I hear, well, give them two. Okay, they're going to lose both at some point.
Yeah.
How do I deal with that? Especially if they live in a place that I can't get them the token in the next day.
And then what about if you are? I mean, you can do those things, of course. And then do you all have a? Because there's newer like kind of device identity, but then there's also like using a combination of pass keys plus your password username, kind of like helps with that. Like what sort of strategy do you like prefer?
I mean, I do like not having all your eggs in one basket. Just relying on a single factor or.
Of course, yeah, two-factor for sure.
Well, right, but I mean, even two-factor being a single factor itself, having I got my
thumbprint plus
thumbprint, but having having a combination of OTP and maybe a stored credential that it's encrypted that you can't see yourself, but you carry it around with you, or maybe it's
it's the certificate on the computer.
Right, certificate on your computer, something that you have that's harder to tamper with. I mean, it's not impossible to tamper with, but it's the situational, it's the situation. Are you going to be able to get my OTP and tamper with whatever physical thing I have at the exact same time? Right. I mean, not saying that it's not possible, but it's not as feasible for that to happen.
It also depends on the targetability of a particular organization, right? If I have like 500 people, okay, but if I'm not like a high-risk organization.
Right. Well, yeah, I think it's focused on, even in a high-risk organization, you got to look at it from a risk perspective. Which employees are your biggest risk?
Yeah.
Right. So you may have to, and if they're technically, they're technical people, then you can say you're going to have to deal with a more sophisticated, complicated authentication method, because if somebody compromises you, all bets are off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But somebody who doesn't have access to that, more confidential, sensitive data, maybe they can be lesser, forced to use something that's less complicated. But then you have controls in place as compensating controls that looks for anomalistic behavior, right?
It's so interesting, right? Like, I mean, when you think about all these areas, because everything has an impact.
Yeah.
And everything like can be looked at from a little bit of a customized lens on an organization basis. But you really do have to look. I mean, just the other day there was the MQ for IAM and access management, and lo and behold, right? Okta and Ping, and I think it was, can't remember who was the last one, but it was Okta and Ping were basically tied for like first place almost.
Maybe one last.
Azure AD, my bad.
Oh, Azure AD, yeah. That's right.
So it's like those three. So the real question is like, you could go with any of them and it's great, but like naturally like. Okta is more cloud focused versus Ping is definitely prem focused with their Ping Federate. And if you're a bank, yes, you are going to probably be having Ping in your environment.
Yeah, right.
Do you all use? I think you use Azure AD, right?
Well, we're using Okta. Initially,
Okta,
we were using
Azure.
Azure AD, but it made sense to. I mean, it was more of a, at the time, it was what was available because we were an Office 365 shop, so it made sense.
Well, what made you use Okta then?
Because it's well known. I mean, I came.
Well, I mean, over Azure AD.
I think it's the fact that it's probably easier to integrate with more of what we're using.
Yeah.
It seems that the Azure AD has been more of a complication for the IT department to deploy, in a rapid fashion, right? They struggled with it, basically.
Oh yeah. I mean, Microsoft has never really been good at the whole UI thing.
Right. And I think, it comes down to usability, right? I mean, if it's not as usable, if it's more complicated to maintain, it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago about, getting to the value proposition. If it's going to take you so long to actually get it deployed, and in all honesty, my understanding, because I wasn't here when they first decided on Azure AD, we've had Azure AD since I've been here,
and not everything was going.
Everything was going through it.
But this was definitely like a project for you, right? Because you have to go through and do everything. I know you worked on the IAM stack, and then you brought in Okta. Obviously, you had to go in and
well, we're still working on it.
Yeah.
IAM is a huge. So what we had to do is lay the foundation first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the process of addressing IAM exclusively with some sort of automation orchestration platform to manage the entitlement side of it, because I think that's the other part of IAM that always gets lost. And I just actually read an article today about that. A lot of people focusing on IGA Lite using IDPs to do that, and they're like, the biggest disconnect is they don't properly manage entitlement. So yeah, sure, I can say from an IDP perspective that I granted you access to this platform,
right? And
I know that there's a set of user roles that are mapped to the role that I'm giving you within my IDP, but I don't really know what your entitlement is. Right? I have to go talk to the system owner, and maybe I've documented it, but it's sitting in a flat file somewhere, a Word document.
What are you supposed to have access to in this product?
Right.
Not just off the, yeah.
And my perspective on that is, why are we doing all that? Not just for consistency and managing entitlement, but when you're in an incident crisis where you're dealing with access problems, someone's got into your environment, and you're trying to figure out, okay, we know, however, that this credential's been compromised, so do we know what this person actually has access to?
Yeah. Right? Like what are they accessing? How are they accessing it? Things like that on a regular basis.
So I could say, okay, this person's a financial analyst, so they technically should only have access to a few things. Well, the reality is that may not be true.
They may have access to 10, 15
because we didn't properly manage entitlement, and somebody assigned them to a group that we didn't even know had some kind of entitlement to it, and now the attacker, the first thing they want to do is enumerate privilege.
Right.
What kind of stuff can I get into? It's the same attack that happens in Amazon, right? I get a hold of a credential,
and now which S3?
I'm going to pound on every API call to see which ones
work.
Which ones work.
So then, when you look at this stuff, I mean, I love talking to you about it because I think that you can get into all these details and you get into everything. How should someone become like you? Like, what should they do to be like you? I mean, because
what
should they even be?
No,
like
no, no. I mean, I don't want to be unique. I think
somebody wants to be a CISO, for example.
Well, right. So I keep hearing this, and I agree with a lot of what I hear. CISOs need to be more focused on business relationship. I think foundationally you still need to have some technical understanding.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing you can do is make decisions.
Yeah, but this stuff, man. We were talking the same way you were talking earlier. Is like, can the salesperson? Not salesperson, but the face of the company to you, can they speak intelligently about it?
Well, right. But where I was going with it though is I can, if I'm technical and a lot of people in this role are, if I can also sort of map that or translate that to business outcomes or business risk, then I'm going to make mistakes that are going to impact the business, and I'm going to lose reputation, and I'm not going to be successful in pushing whatever I'm trying to do. But on the flip side, if I'm very business focused as a CISO, and I don't understand the technology, and I don't understand the potential outcomes from that, and I get it. You have teams that are supposed to be, and they should be, and they probably are, but they may not know, but they may not understand how to even do that mapping between, okay, this technology has the potential of doing this.
Yeah.
And I've been in plenty, and it's not just a CISO problem. I mean, I've been in plenty of conversations with leaders who aren't asking the right questions, right? Their team's telling them we're going to do this, and they don't know enough about the technology to know to ask certain questions that will have an impact on the business, because unfortunately the subject matter experts aren't really focused on the business outcome. They're focused on, I got to get this thing deployed.
But I think one thing I care is, like, these are interesting problems to work on, right? They're interesting, challenges. Hey, how do I communicate this? How should I build this? How should I build a relationship with my IT team if they're not reporting to the CIO/CISO in the first place? But like, dude, there must be some pet peeve that you have in cyber. Tell me, like, what's the worst, most annoying thing that you have? It doesn't have to be like work related. It can be anything.
I'm trying to think of a pet peeve. I mean, I probably have quite a bit. Well, I can tell you one of the first things is I'm so sick and tired of hearing people say, I don't really understand what security does.
Oh, the apps don't work, yeah.
I'm like, what? I could say the same thing. I don't really understand what IT does. Oh no, we issue computers, we manage servers. Okay, but what are you really doing? Like, because you're waiting for the business to tell you what to do. In some cases, you're not thinking strategically. You're waiting for the business to tell you that we need to do something. So I could say the same thing. I could say I don't really know what DevOps is really doing. I mean, I know what the DevOps mentality is, or that methodology. But
when they ask it, they're not asking to learn. They're just saying like, I don't know what security does.
A lot of times what they're asking, why they're asking it as a defense mechanism to say you need to stop what you're doing.
Oh, God.
Like I don't understand what security is doing. I don't understand what they do.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys do. And I have no problem stepping into conversations where I hear that, but if they seem sincere enough, they want to learn. But when I hear it in the middle of a meeting, I don't really understand why security is even here. You're like, okay, everything we do has a risk. You waking up in the morning, putting your clothes on is a
risk.
Has a risk, right? I mean, I'm not saying that security should be sitting in your room watching you do that. That's
creepy.
What
I'm saying. Yeah.
But the point I'm making is that from a business perspective, who else is watching and making sure that we're evaluating risk? I kind of look at it as that we're playing devil's advocate. I'm sitting in a room listening to the chief revenue officer, or listening to the marketing team talking about all these new things they want to do, or finance, right? They need somebody in there who can say, okay, that's great. I think it's awesome. I support what you're doing, but let me run down a list of things that we need to be worried about, that we can address, that we can collectively figure out how to work through, that you probably hadn't even thought of.
I love it, man. And I think that's where you have to so it's great to hear that pet peeve. Obviously great to see that. And for thirdly, I just have to really appreciate you as a person for believing in me. First off, because a big part of dope security history.
Thank you.
Secondly, thanks so much for coming here. And
great. I'm glad the weather worked out.
I know the weather,
because we could be ice skating right now.
Yeah. I last but not least, tell me what really made you believe in dope?
Well, I mean, you for sure. I mean, I could tell from the first conversation, your passion, your sincerity, but you also understood the problems, right? That's what I said during our conversation. I want to make sure that whoever I'm on a part with really truly understands the problems. And you knew some of the same things that I felt with other vendors in this space, and your product is trying to solve that and has solved that, right? So for me, it's like it was like music to my ears to hear. Okay, you get it. Like some other partners I've partnered with in the past, I've listened to startup companies, very very disruptive, and I've heard what they were saying, and I'm like, yeah, you guys get it. You understand the use cases, the problem statement. You're not just reading off a marketing playbook,
of course,
telling me what I want to hear. And I never got
authenticity, right? You got to be
very
authentic. I think that's the case whether you're in product, whether you're a founder or a CEO, or if you're in a CISO, any position, just be yourself.
You got to be authentic.
Got to be yourself. Be authentic.
Be authentic and have integrity.
Exactly. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Catch you again
soon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you soon.
This is great.
Take care.
All right.